I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard Knock Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV.
Welcome to Hard Knock Life. I'm Keith Chow.
I'm Britney Monet.
I'm Dominic Ma.
What a weekend we just got out of. It was WrestleMania, it was the Grammys, and Morbius is the #1 movie in the country. What an eventful weekend.
Good job.
Nobody
Morbius.
got slapped, I don't think. Did anyone slap Louis C.K. when he won the Grammy last night? That's what I want to know, because
Probably not.
cancel
but
culture is real, apparently. So you can win. you can win Grammys when you're Louis C.K.
Yeah. Oh gosh. That was just an example of like, okay, a white person did something way worse than what Will Smith did, still getting accolades and stuff, and then Will Smith has to like.
Here's the thing about the whole Will Smith, and you know, we don't need to keep talking about Will Smith 2 weeks after,
Yeah.
but he resigned from the Academy last week, and now like Netflix is canceling his movies. Like, why are we trying to dismantle the like biggest movie star in the world just because he slapped Chris Rock over a stupid joke? It just, I mean, what are we doing here? Like, it's like punishment does not fit the crime.
No, it's
Yeah,
true.
exactly.
There's a crazy double standard happening, which was the worst possible outcome. We could have just saw it as a weird, funny moment on television, but now like they're trying to assign meaning to it, and the meaning is, you know, shutting down the big movie star who happens to be a black guy.
Yeah.
And speaking of scandal, we didn't even talk about like Ezra Miller is acting crazy.
That's another thing. Like, he got arrested last
They got
week.
the Flash Award was like
His response to the Flash entering the Speed Force is, let me assault. And this is on top of
not cheerworthy.
This is on top of a couple years ago. Like, there's that video that there still has been no explanation about. I don't know if you caught like this viral video from some
when he's,
fan
like,
event a few
choking
years
someone.
ago. Yeah, he was choking a fan, and like there's been a bunch of stories that like the fan was being overly aggressive, that they were actually was a bit that they were planning. Like, no one's ever talked about it. No one's ever like explained like what's happening here. But now he's going off and he's assaulting people in Hawaii. So like, maybe this Flash movie is never coming out, is what I'm thinking.
Well, I just wondered, as we were speculating, why the pushback of the DC movies. If they knew something was brewing with their own cast, they were worried about what was going to come out. But
is it too late to deep fake Grant Gustin in the entire movie? I mean, we still need the movie because we need Michael Keaton's return somehow, but it's a whole mess.
Yeah, it is. I just like, I didn't want to keep talking about it, but I just wanted to say it's just so crazy that you have white people have done way worse than what Will Smith did, and yet Will Smith is getting these crazy repercussions that should have been placed on, like, you know, Louis C.K., who masturbated in front of women who did not want that, or, you know, like Ezra Miller, they slapped people and went to their hotel room and then threatened to kill them. Like, that is, I mean, yes, they is almost,
and everyone go see the Secrets of Dumbledore out next week, right? Like,
yeah, like J.K. Rowling's out here being very crazy, like transphobic, and then it's just, I don't know, I feel like there's all these white people doing way worse than what Will Smith did, and it was just like, okay, yeah, let's have him get all the consequences for something, so, you know, whatever.
Put it this way, it's going to be like the highest
true.
rated Red
It's true.
Table Talk of all time. I mean, when that episode drops on Facebook, like, it's going to have
Yeah.
more views than like the Super Bowl, but at the same time, it's like people reconsidering like all these Will Smith movies, and it's like, that just seems like a weird reaction.
reconsidering? That's-
No,
Yeah.
like the Netflix had a deal with Will to like release a bunch of movies, and they're like, we're going to put that on hold now. And
Yeah.
it's just like, why? Like,
Oh, okay.
who's going like into a Will Smith movie like, well, he just slapped Chris Rock, so I'm never watching Will Smith again. I mean, I get that his like reputation is tarnished, or what, like it is this like big scandal that you have to get out from under, but I don't feel like it's like again, it's the punishment is not fitting the crime.
Yeah.
To your point, Dominic, this was like a throwaway kind of haha, like Chris said in the moment, that's the greatest thing that's ever happened on television, right? Like it could have been just like a throwaway joke, never to be done. But I think we just, for some reason, having to escalate it further and further. You know, he resigned from the academy, but the academy's like, we're still going to discipline him. And it's just like,
Yeah,
what is
it's
even happening here?
yeah, I don't know. When you just think of like Roman Polanski and Woody Allen and Sean Penn, who have all done like
Kevin
way-
Spacey still
yeah,
got his 2 Oscars somewhere, right? Like,
yeah, like all these people have done more egregious stuff, and it's like they're not. And then people are like, well, it was because it happened on live television. Like, it doesn't matter. We know all these other people did this stuff too, and none of their awards are being, pulled back. Harvey Weinstein, like, come on.
like an incident between 2 people that didn't have to escalate into this crazy, like the LAPD was on, standby to arrest Will Smith. Like, what the fuck? But anyway, we're not here to keep litigating the slap. I will say shout out to John Baptiste, who won Album of the Year last night, and people were like saying this has been a great year to be a late night show band leader. And I'm like, John Baptiste has an Oscar. In fact, 2/3 of the late night talk show house bands have Oscar-winning band leaders. It's like the Jimmy Kimmel guy needs to step it up, is what I'm saying. But we're not here to talk about Oscars, Grammys, or anything like that. We're here to talk about our favorite Disney Plus Marvel superhero. We are now in a post Moon Knight world. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on episode 1 of Moon Knight. You've been anticipating the show for, I feel like, a long time. Dominic's been giving us, info dumps on who the Moon Knight character is. You got to see him use his moonograms or whatever the fuck.
Crescent darts. Crescent darts. Jeez.
Wait, does he use
Do I
them in
have to
episode
come
1?
through the Zoom and smack you? I'm sorry, is it too soon? That was a poor choice of words. But I realize they aren't even really darts. They are large
Batarang shaped thing.
much like the ones that Batman has. They kind of cop the design of like, oh, they're just on his chest.
Well,
How
here's the thing,
convenient.
right? Like you said that Moon Knight is essentially like the Marvel Universe's take on Batman. Stephen Grant is this billionaire who has all these cool
Mark
gadgets.
Spector is, yeah.
Mark Spector, I'm sorry. But I thought Stephen Grant was the billionaire.
I don't remember. And of course, okay, my info dump was partial and not conclusive and wrong as far as the show goes. And I'm glad.
The show is different. So that's where I was
glad.
getting at.
I'm very glad about the direction they're going. So
exactly. The point I was getting at is the show is clearly going in a very different direction than like the old 70s comics, because Stephen Grant is the main protagonist, at least in episode 1. And it's very different from the Stephen Grant of the comics, because as you said, the Stephen Grant of the comics is kind of this billionaire persona. Mark Spector is the mercenary persona. It's kind of like the 2 halves of Batman, I guess. But either way, the idea of like a Batman type superhero where he's like funding his own mission and he's got these like is not where they're going. Like Moon Knight is 100% supernatural character.
Yeah.
What is your take? How did you feel of Oscar Isaac's performance? That janky British accent is not a one-off. He's in that like 100% for the whole series. So Brittany, what is your take on Moon Knight since you've been anticipating the show?
I feel like now that you've seen the character, it makes sense that the character has an accent like that, and it's kind of like it goes with like him being not as smart as Mark, or being the bumbling idiot guy who kind of has bad luck. Like it it fits, but it is like weird to kind of get used to, because it also feels like someone making fun of a British accent at the same time. But I don't know. I really liked it. I've watched it twice already. So
Dominic, what was your impression of the Moon Knight pilot?
Well, I really like that he's a dork. Going back to what we're saying, like they could have gone the angle of he's a sort of billionaire Batman-ish character. But at this point in MCU, we've had our fill of characters who are like highly trained, expert in their fields, top of their game, secret agents. And so it's really good to go back to this other, secret identity trope of a guy who's really a dork and is a silly job that he doesn't like and is struggling at life and will, come to receive great power. This is a great angle. And actually, it's weird that we actually haven't had that angle in a while.
Considering there's been 3 Peter Parker movies.
Yeah.
That's always been your take on the MCU Spider-Man, is that he's not,
he's
down
not,
on his luck Peter Parker.
Yeah, he's not as much, a put upon dork as classical Peter Parker. He has friends. He's really good at tech, and man, does he have a lot of resources. Right. Tony Stark in their ship. So yeah, so we get back to that thing of like, yeah, that that job as assistant at the gift shop and museum is doesn't a great outlook on life. And and even his accent, like he's not whatever accent he's not doing like a classy English guy accent or the English villain accent. He's doing kind of a sort of stuttery, jittery guy. And I think because Oscar Isaac is a good actor, he's being very effective at it.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that I appreciate of this version of Moon Knight and the show writ large is that even though it's firmly set in the MCU, right? It's a Marvel Studios production. It's not like one of the offshoots like Runaways or Cloak and Dagger. It's Kevin Feige is an executive producer on Moon Knight. It feels disconnected from the MCU in a good way, right? And I think in interviews, Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke have said that was the appeal. That, if you ask them what their favorite MCU movie is, they'll say Iron Man, because Iron Man is the messiest. It's the one that doesn't feel like it's setting up a universe or having to like dictate what's happening, the next chapter of a story. It's kind of like able to world build on its own. If you said this movie has nothing to do with the MCU, it still works. Like there's not like the secret, you see a lot of YouTube videos like, well, here's the secret Wakanda connection and here's the secret, this and that. Is like, sure, it might be there under the surface, but it's not overtly like Wong shows up just to like walk Moon Knight through a thing, or you know what I mean? Like Captain Marvel shows up.
You've seen the first 4. It's still like that where you're at. It's the not
100%. And it's and like I said though, it doesn't do anything to contradict the MCU. It's not like they don't as far as I've seen 2/3 of the series, and it's not like what snap? I've never heard of like it's not anything like that, right? But it doesn't go out of its way to like even show you like Captain America's shield in the background or whatever. Like maybe there is some like deep cut Easter eggs that I wasn't seeing on my screener, but to me that's what I enjoy about it. Like it doesn't feel beholden to the universe, because the thing too is that like, and I don't spoil episodes that people haven't seen yet, but like its approach to Egyptian gods is very different from how Marvel has approached gods in the past, right? Like I'll say this without spoiling, the Egyptian gods who show, and we see Khonshu in this episode. The Egyptian gods that we encounter throughout the series, it's not like, oh, they're really just aliens from another dimension in the way that like the Norse gods are, right? It's like, it really is like, oh, we live in a world where there are, I mean, maybe they'll tie it to some like Doctor Strange shit, but like these are straight up, Khonshu is a straight up god. Amit is a straight up god. You know what I mean? Horus is a straight up god. Like these aren't, so I think it's cool. I mean, I really appreciate just kind of like the freedom they're given to kind of just build their own world and not have to be like, well, how does Thanos fit into this? Because I think that is one, as much as I liked Eternals, I think that's one of the hindrances. Like you had to shoot a scene where Jon Snow asked like, where were you during the snap? Why didn't you stop Thanos? Because it's a relevant question that like if these Eternals have been living on this planet for thousands of years and are all powerful and they have to stop deviants, and it turns out Thanos kind of is a slash deviant Eternal since his brother is Harry Styles. They could have, they really could have intervened in Thanos because he's one of them, right? Like, but anyway,
you brought up last time the question of what why Eternals was a feature film and Moon Knight was a TV show. I mean, I thought that was an interesting case.
Yeah, because it would, if you flipped it, it would just as well.
Yeah, because like Eternals, we talked about it, could have been a TV show. It's got a lot of characters and a lot of world building to do. It might have worked better as one. And Moon Knight is focused on one character arc and kind of might lend itself to a feature film. But I just think that's interesting as far as like in the Marvel Comics buzz meter, like now that they're getting into they've gotten through most of their A and B list characters, we can say. They're going into the third tier of characters that people aren't that familiar with, like Eternals and Moon Knight.
And that's so generous to call them third tier, right?
Yeah, I'm not trying to harsh. I don't know how many tiers there are really. I mean, we're all winners in the Avengers universe, but
yeah,
yes, there's Spider-Man and Wolverine, and then there's Shroud. But I'll get into Shroud later. But I mean, my whole point is someone is doing that math, like, so this character should it be a movie or should it be a TV show, or what can we get it with? Well, how interested can we get people in Moon Knight? How interested can we get people in Eternals without The years of
And
reference material.
like, is there going to be follow-up, right? Like, I don't, where the screeners stop, I have no idea where the show is going. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you were asking me, Brittany, like, do they keep that tone throughout where it's like, it feels like its own world? I'm like, yes, it definitely feels like they're not beholden to whatever else is happening in the MCU. But like the way episode 4 ends, it's like, holy shit, what are they going to do in these final 2 episodes, kind of thing, right? So who knows? Like, the Avengers might show up in episode 5 for all I care. But what I wonder is, to Dominic's point about like this next phase of the Marvel universe, like, because we know there's already like kind of back and forth between Disney Plus and the movies with the other shows, right? Like WandaVision's leading right into Multiverse of Madness. Ms. Marvel and the Marvels are connected, right? Like, all of the Disney Plus shows are not in vacuums. They're seeding what's happening in the movie side, right? They're going back and forth with each other, where characters show up in the TV shows are going to end up in the movies and vice versa. Like, does Moon Knight show up eventually in a movie, or are they just kind of telling this little side story, and then at the end, like, maybe they'll do a Moon Knight season 2, maybe they won't, but it doesn't really matter, because ultimately the Marvel Universe comics are like that. Like, characters are always like dip in and out of each other's books. Like, there are some Marvel books that just kind of like are self-contained, like the big Avengers, Fantastic Four, X-Men stuff. Well, they all kind of seed into each other's books, but I kind of feel like Moon Knight, Luke Cage, like those kinds of books, Iron Fist, they kind of exist in their own little world. They don't like always have to show up unless it's a huge crossover event. They're not showing up in a Spider-Man book or showing up in an Avengers book. That might be how they're approaching Moon Knight. I don't know.
Well, they have their own team, or they have their own they have their own section, which is the street level Midnight Sun section. I think so. It's appropriate that it comes out at the same time that the Netflix series moved over, because, as we talked about before, Moon Knight is traditionally more in Daredevil, Luke Cage's world. Although now he's in England, but I assume he gets back to New York or something somehow. But I don't know.
Well, but Mark Spector is an American. Like, when you see the Mark Spector persona in the mirror, he's clearly American. So
yes,
how he ended up in Britain and turned into Stephen Grant, I think, is still a mystery. But at the same time,
I don't know. There's a new, like, I think it's kind of more promoting the next episode, but Ethan Hawke's character is a Harrow. He's telling him, your mind is a pendulum swinging between 2 different worlds. And I don't know if it's like just him talking about him having the split personality disorder, or it is 2 different variants somehow sharing one body.
Oh,
right.
That's interesting.
That's the theory that I've kind of been seeing going around. And I'm like, that could make sense.
I mean, because this is very much, again, without spoiling what you see in episodes 2 through 4, this is very much leaning into, like, it's less like identity disassociation and more like, to your point, it's 2 distinct people, because the one's like, let me take control. And what I find really interesting is that, having zero knowledge of what happens in the comic book, I don't know how much DID factors into the comic book persona, but this does feel more like something more kind of supernatural, something more like superpowery than just someone who, like a Hulk, Bruce Banner type thing, more than someone who just had like completely disassociates when he's in a different persona, because clearly he knows he's like leaving his body when he's that's why he straps himself into the bed while he's like putting tape on the doors and stuff. So he knows something is happening.
I think he does that as a way to like show nothing's happening, and then when he sees that everything is how he left it, he thinks it's fine and nothing happened.
Yeah.
Until he realizes that his goldfish suddenly has 2 fins instead of the 1.
Yeah, what's with the goldfish thing?
I think it's perhaps like, when he was Mark, he accidentally killed the fish and he had to go find a replacement fish, but didn't, I mean, one thing that doesn't quite clear up through the course of the show is just exactly how the consciousness transfer works, because as we see in episode 1, it seems like whenever Steven's in trouble, Mark comes out and protects him,
sort of like the Hulk.
Yeah. And Steven has no recollection
Have you seen Split?
I have not seen Split.
Wow.
So they have a scene in the movie with it's all of the different personalities, and it's like they're sitting in a room and they're all sitting on chairs and they're waiting for their turn, or one gets up and just takes over. And that's like how they show it, like as a representation, is like all these people sitting and whoever gets control, but they all don't like talk to each other unless they're all in that like quote unquote room together. And they still try not to like make sure the other one doesn't know what they're doing. So I don't know if it's almost the same like concept, because obviously anytime Steven wakes up, he has no idea why he's
Well, so
there.
I'll say like that trope from episode 1 evolves. I'll just say,
Okay.
right? So it's not like he's just constantly blacking out. But that goes back to like, you know, we can dive into this as we progress along the season. Just how does the Mark Steven dynamic work? Because as I said in the beginning, it's like he has no idea. Mark takes over, and then Mark, you know, readily hands the body back to Steven, you know. And the way that's established is not necessarily consistent throughout the series, I'll just say. But I wanted to ask you guys, I know Brittany, you appreciate the movie Venom more than most folks. Did you get Venom vibes from episode 1? Because I feel like
A little bit.
to me, it was a lot funnier than I anticipated, because like the Khonshu Steven dynamic feels a lot like Venom and Eddie.
Yeah. And I don't know. I thought it was funny when he was like, "Oh, the idiot's in control again." Like, I don't know. I was laughing, and I've been saying that since I've watched the episode. I don't know.
Yes, we can all relate to that problem, right?
Yes. I don't know. I thought it was really funny. I like Venom, so, but I'm not seeing Morbius. Putting that out there.
Oh man, that Morbius, Jesus Christ.
Jared Leto's in control again.
Well, you know, we don't talk about Morbius, but it is interesting that I didn't watch it. Nobody watched it. I don't know how that fucking movie made $40 million over the weekend, to be honest. But the 2 post-credit sequences did end up on the internet. Did you happen to catch the credit sequences?
No, tell me what they are, because I don't want to see the movie.
Oh yeah. No, trust me. That's but the post-credit sequences aren't better. So as you know, in the trailers for Morbius, we see Michael Keaton in the trailers, right? In fact, there's a very specific scene in that first trailer that came out like 5,000 years ago, where he's like in a police station and he's like, "What's up, Doc?" or some shit. That scene's apparently not in the movie at all. In fact, Adrian Toomes is not in the proper movie whatsoever. Like minute 1 to minute 120 or however long that fucking movie is, there is no Vulture at all. Post-credit sequence number 1, mid-credit sequence. We cut to the skies of New York start turning purple. Sounds very reminiscent of No Way Home, right? As we know, the rules of No Way Home is when the skies turned purple, that was people coming into the MCU universe.
People running everywhere.
Doctor Strange closed it. People went back to their respective universes. Somehow, according to the Sony people, that caused Adrian Toomes from the MCU to be sucked out of the MCU and dropped into the Morbius universe. Because after the skies turn purple, Adrian shows up in a jail cell. He just materializes inside a jail cell.
Okay.
And a really shitty,
makes sense to me.
And then a really shitty like cut to some local New York broadcast where the anchor is like, "This man appeared out of nowhere in a jail cell and was released from prison because he didn't do anything wrong."
Oh my gosh.
So it shows Adrian being released from prison.
They're really overplaying the TV news screen as exposition dump. I can say that's a little easy, but it does jive with, again, Venom also blips into Peter Parker's universe, or whichever the prime universe is, and blips out again.
Well, that at least that's consistent with the rules. But that's consistent with the rules, where like he was dragged into the MCU, and once the spell was fixed, he was brought back. Credits sequence number 2. We see Morbius. I guess whatever happens in the movie makes Morbius want to drive off into the countryside, maybe to protect people so he doesn't have to turn into a vampire and kill them. So he's driving off into like middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden there's a giant noise and he gets out of the car, and the Vulture, in complete costume, he's wearing his MCU costume. So somehow when he blipped into the Venomverse, because this does take place in the Venomverse, when he blips into the Venomverse, he somehow also brought his wings and his helmet, and he shows up in full regalia, and he tells Morbius like, "I don't know how I got here, but I think Spider-Man has something to do with it. Would you like to team up?" And that's credit sequence number 2, because the Sony Spider-Verse has a hard-on for a Sinister Six movie. They're trying to, again, fast track a Sinister Six movie by having Morbius and Vulture team up
Oh,
to fight the
so
Spider-Man.
are they admitting that they haven't really done one because that No Way Home was a Sinister Five movie? God damn it! Which is fine, but it's still the beef I pick with the
Sinister Six.
No Way Home movie.
Yeah.
Had
But
to be-
but the thing is, like, and we talked about this last week, how, you know, because when the director was like talking about how, yeah, that's this person is that character, because like a lot of times these folks don't know the ins and outs of like the nerd continuity and everything like that. They just like they just make shit up because they're not following the minutiae of continuity like nerds do, which is, you know, no fault of their own. Like, to them, they're just people who make movies and they don't necessarily are not as invested in the fandoms. But there is like a baseline of common sense, I think. And this is
there?
clearly,
I'm anxious to hear
maybe
this.
not. Maybe there isn't. Maybe
But
there
go
isn't.
ahead.
Well, but no, like, you know, you just can't like fuck with the rules however you want just to satisfy your own kind of like ambitions. You know what I'm saying? Like, this was the Marvel Television MCU divide in the past, who were like folks who didn't really have say over what is quote unquote canon and what isn't, were implying things were canon when like the arbiter of canonicity, Mr. Feige, was like, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. This counts. That doesn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, you know, we were just been talking about this with Moon Knight. Like, canon should not be the end all and be all, as long as the stories are good.
Yes.
Right. But this is clearly an example where like they're not just implying that like we are existing in the same universe the way like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. might have in its later seasons, or like the Netflix show. This is full on like we're pulling a scene straight out of it, No Way Home, and it's almost like false advertising. We're telling you this is taking place in the same universe, even though it 100% is not.
Yeah.
Right. It's like we're saying this is literally happening. This is not just like an idea. This is literally happening.
Yeah.
There's literally these two universes colliding.
Right.
And that so it makes sense, even though it doesn't really. But
Right, exactly.
They're trying to establish the sense that it makes sense.
And especially when you had like like if you were that desperate to have actors from the MCU in your universe to kind of legitimize your attempt to make your own universe, you could just say Michael Keaton is a variant of the Adrian Toomes that we know from the MCU. Like it doesn't have to be, no, he's literally the guy that you saw in Homecoming with all the motivations and all of the this and that. And, you know, because the other thing that doesn't make sense is that if you look at the way that character was left off in Homecoming, he didn't have a vendetta against Peter Parker. Right? Remember, Scorpion approaches him and it's like, I heard you know who Spider-Man is. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, he was cool with Peter. I mean, he doesn't know who Peter is anymore, I guess, but who the fuck knows? Maybe the Venom people don't. They're just picking and choosing what they want to find. I don't know. Why am I getting worked up? Because no one is going to see Morbius 2. Guess what? Goalie Nutrition is sponsoring Hard Knock Life, and you can go to goalie.com to buy apple cider vinegar gummies. They're ashwagandha gummies, superfruit gummies, and super greens gummies. And you get 10% off plus free shipping if you use the code HARDKNOCK at goalie.com. This is honestly, I've been taking the goalie gummies now for a couple weeks, and I have to say, they're tasty and they're good for you. Have you guys been enjoying the goalie gummies?
I really like them. They're yummy, but it's a nice to add to my like routine of already like, I normally take just straight vitamin C, so it's nice to have like extra supplements.
For a long time, people have praised the benefits of apple cider vinegar. And, you know, as someone who's had to like drink straight apple cider vinegar sometimes when I'm not feeling well, or, you know, I have some joint pain and your mom is like, drink some apple cider vinegar. It's not the most appetizing home remedy, let's just say.
Right.
It tastes horrible.
So, like, the apple cider part is like, ooh, does it taste like apple cider? And it's like, no, it tastes like vinegar. But ACV is very good for you. And the fact that Goalie has been able to put the ACV into these tasty little gummies made with pectin and fruit peels, which make them vegan, which is cool. So if you're vegan, you can still rock these gummies, because everyone knows gummies are usually made out of like gelatin and nasty shit. These are made out of complete non-GMO, gelatin-free, gluten-free, vegan ingredients, and you can get the benefits, all of the benefits of apple cider vinegar, taking these tasty, delicious, convenient gummies. So go to goalie.com and use the code HARDKNOCK, that's HARDNOC, just like the podcast you're listening to. Get 10% off your purchase of Goalie products and free shipping.
It's a much better delivery device for that apple cider vinegar.
Yeah.
These Goalie gummies are great. You get
I
it, and it's
agree
a
100.
delicious little candy. And I've been enjoying the Super Fruits one. I did feel kind of refreshed after taking a few of those.
Yeah, no, but I'm loving them so far, and they're definitely tasty. If you just want tasty gummies, at least just eat them for the yumminess.
Yeah. So go to goalie.com, use the code HARDKNOCK, HARDNOC, get 10% off your purchase and free shipping at goalie.com with the code HARDKNOCK.
Yeah, that was a fairly long Morbius tangent, but I think I get it. But to bring back to Moon Knight for a second, like I realize that all the characters are tied up in their legal worlds, but part of the thing that's such a mismatch is Morbius isn't like a great Spider-Man villain. He doesn't really even fit the vibe. Morbius would be a great Moon Knight villain. Should just bring them over, and like one of the things they do in the comics, like the villains aren't like attached to Hero by contract. They could switch it up a bit, like Acts of Vengeance. But I realize that's not going to happen because Sony's actually just legally protecting all their Spider-Man and Spider-Man associated characters. But Morbius's vampire and Creature of the Night would work better over on the Moon Knight side of things.
Or particularly if they do team Moon Knight up with Blade and the Black Knight, right? Which everyone's assuming is happening.
Yeah.
Yes, I will say for the record, I will see Kraven the Hunter movie just because I love Aaron Taylor Johnson that much. Where I will see the movie even if it looks like it's worse of a train wreck than Morbius. So.
Oh, great! I forgot
I
that it was proceeding with the Kraven the Hunter movie.
I'm going to see it because I love him. So that is all.
No, that's cool. I mean, I think conceptually Kraven the Hunter is a better idea for a movie than he is as a comic book character. Comic book character, he's a bit cheesy. But like a guy who's just like an extremely good hunter, that's like a good premise for a movie.
Who hunts superheroes, right?
Like
that's
whether he hunts superheroes or not. I mean, I assume he hunts some form of superhero.
I mean, my whole, and who knows? I mean, do you really trust the Sony people? But like my only issue with Kraven the Hunter is that unless they establish who Spider-Man is in that universe, because that's the other thing. Clear, like the director, but again, you got to take the director Morbius with a grain of salt. But he's like, no, there is a Spider-Man in our universe. We just haven't met him yet. So remember, the Venom and Morbius exist in the same kind of like overall universe. There is a Spider-Man, whether it's the Garfield Spider-Man or not, remains to be seen. Although I feel like the more and more we are reclaiming the Amazing Spider-Man, like because folks are now coming along to where you two have been for years. Do you really want to put Andrew Garfield in this fucked up universe is the other thing. But so there is a Spider-Man out there in the ether in the Venom Morbius world. Can't be Toby though. Toby had his Venom. Remember, like his Venom is not Tom Hardy.
Retcon. They can come up.
Yeah, because like who gives a shit about continuity at the end of the day?
Yeah. Plus, they have a zillion symbiotes, as we know. Symbiotes are never ending. That could have just been one of them. I don't think they even called him Venom per se in Spider-Man 3. I can't remember, but I'm just saying we can always have more symbiotes. That's one thing I know from the comics.
Well, since Morbius could not be the villain in Moon Knight, I do want to talk a little bit about Arthur Harrow, who was the villain in the form of Ethan Hawke. I mentioned this a little bit last week that he surprised me with how interesting his take on the villain would be. What was your impression of Ethan Hawke, his debut in superhero media, after he couldn't be Doctor Strange as much as Britney wanted?
I was like, oh well, he still should have been Doctor Strange. No, Ethan Hawke is really just one of the best actors out there. He's just so good. I really love the moment where he's actually kind of chasing him through the museum and he does the Amunet test thing and he's like, there's chaos. And I don't know, the way he delivers that line was very good. I don't know, I like Ethan Hawke and he's kind of creepy and now he's walking around with glass in his sandals, like dude, what is this? Like,
I have to admit, like I love Ethan Hawke too. I mean, the Before trilogy is like my favorite cinematic trilogy of all time, more than like Star Wars and The Dark Knight. But I wasn't sure, especially after that first Moon Knight teaser, like I don't know, it just doesn't feel like he fits in the MCU. Like with that terrible wig and everything. But
I think that's his hair.
But at the end of the day, I feel like he's a very
too.
Yeah, probably that he makes a very compelling villain.
Okay.
And
he's creepy, a cult leader.
Yeah. I was going to say too, like villain. I wouldn't even go so far as call him a villain necessarily. I guess he does get people killed in episode 1. But it's one of those things where it's like, is he a villain? I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't.
I just watched the movie called The Endless that Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who I believe they're directing episode 2 and 4. They like co-wrote and directed, and they're also both in this movie. And the movie is about two brothers who somehow grew up in a cult, and they left.
Okay.
And then years later, they come back to like kind of see, what's going on with them or whatever. And weird stuff with time jumps and like disorientation happens a lot. So I can very much see like why they're doing this. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to see if there's gonna be any like close similarities, but I don't know. You guys should check out that movie, because then you'll see like why Aaron and Justin are like a part of the team. Because I was like, oh, okay, this cult stuff and disorientation and stuff, like it fits very well together.
Yeah,
that sounds cool.
And that's the the creepiest part of Ethan Hawke's character, villain, semi-villain, is cult leader kind of charisma, let's say, shades of Purple Man a bit, and from Jessica Jones with the subtle mind controlling bit.
Yeah.
And also, I also I really like of Moon Knight. I really like the editing and directing that's going on. Like it has a certain jagged style that fits with the mental state. That's not like beating you over the head with it. And it's pretty, and it establishes Stephen Grant's dorky world really well in that first hour without having to have too much superhero stuff at all. And really, that's a trick, because a lot of them cheat and like just bring in the costume really soon and have a big set piece. But it builds suspense with all these like flashing in and out of his reality. So to me, that's very encouraging. I also wanted to we're back to Khonshu. I was really pleased to learn it's F. Murray Abraham.
Yeah, as the
voicing Khonshu, because sort of like you guys, as initially I had a little reaction, like he sounds a little jokey, like a berating English teacher. You thought he sounded like a Transformer?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the one Transformer, but I thought it was him.
Right, but something like that. Something not overpoweringly creepy, but a little, but there's something a little whimsical about it. But to me, that fits with F. Murray Abraham, who is, I don't think as the big villainous god figure, but a subtle and funny actor who is, of course, best known in certain generations for winning the Oscar for Salieri, Amadeus, who is another character who was having kind of a big mental split. Sorry, just to bring it all full circle from Moon Knight to Mozart. That was my goal this rant.
One of my favorite movies.
Yeah, so beautiful.
Yes. So is Immortal Beloved. I had to watch both of them in like music history class, so that's why I associate those movies like that.
Well, and it's
totally.
I on my personal website, I don't know if you guys knew this, but like I have this hobby where I track the Oscar wins of superhero actors. So like I have all of the Batman actors who've won or been nominated for Oscars.
Okay.
And so that's how it started. This was like at this point 15 years ago. Who knows how long ago it was. I was like, wow, a lot of people who've been in Batman movies have had Oscars. So I kind of like just researched and made a list of like, oh, these are all the act like Jack Nicholson and Jack Palance and blah blah blah. So I keep it updated every year when the nominations and then when the ceremony comes out and I update who's won an Oscar, who's been nominated.
Wow.
And then over the last few years, I've expanded those lists to be like, now I have a DCEU list and I have a Marvel Cinematic Universe list and a Spider-Man list and an X-Men list of like, these are all the X-Men actors who have Oscars in their resumes. But I've been actually at a loss the last few months. This is the type of shit I do in my free time, because thus far I only count the movie actors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now that the MCU is bleeding into television, do I count actors who are only appearing in television in those lists? Because I don't do that for DC, right? Like the Batman, Burgess Meredith is on the list only because Batman the movie in 1966 was released in theaters. So do I now, like Ethan Hawke, F. Murray Abraham, Haley Steinfeld, like they're in the MCU, but they haven't yet been in MCU films yet. So do I add them to my list of MCU Oscars?
I feel like unfortunately the MCU shows feel more cinematic than like,
the CW.
like the CW shows.
Ain't no Oscar winners going on the CW.
Yeah, you never know that. Times are hard. I just feel like, since I don't know, it's hard when it's like the MCU shows feel more cinematic than like, some of the DCE shows. So
yeah. Well, and but if I were since I have a DCEU and Oscar list, like Peacemaker's in the DCEU.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Peacemaker is the only one that has like a cinematic feel to it. And
Viola Davis was in Peacemaker and she has an Oscar. So
I think
these are the things that keep me up at night.
If we're just looking for a way for a technicality by which you can arrange your nerdy arbitrary list, Keith, I think you can count the Disney Plus shows as being part of what we've come to call the cinematic universe,
right?
Because they are explicitly attached. And let's be real, they aren't like network TV shows as we used to think of them. If they're limited series. They really aren't like those shows that were on the CW or on ongoing series. They're like special events, and they have a little asterisk that they're part of the cinematic universe.
You're saying I should include the actors who show up on the Disney shows in my arbitrary, absolutely nothing.
But in this limited way, that only certain TV shows from these streaming services,
because the Netflix ones are
not
they
all
are
TV
they not
shows
MCU?
in history.
They are MCU.
But are they? Like that's the thing. Like
on a technicality, they are now MCU.
I guess. But yeah, so No Way Home really fucked with me because I was like, because I always had Willem Dafoe, Andrew Garfield, Jamie Foxx in their own Spider-Man list. But because of fucking No Way Home, they were also technically in the MCU.
Yes, they are.
So I had to go and add them to. Again, I'm the only one who even like looks at these lists. It's not like anyone's visiting my personal Keith Chow website to keep up on the. But if you want to, it's realchild.wordpress.com to see my lists of Oscar nominated and winning superhero actors. Anyway, before we wrap, I did want to touch on one thing we did not talk about last week because there was so much of the episode last week dealt with the Oscars. We did not talk about the deleted Joker scene that was released on the internet by Matt Reeves. I had called it, and I knew they were going to release it eventually, and they finally did through their.
Speaking of Oscar bait,
so what did you think?
That Joker role?
Yeah. Barry Keoghan is going to be
most awarded superhero.
only awarded.
I guess only. Thank you. Sorry, I'm glad I'm talking to the right person.
It's true. Joaquin Phoenix and Heath Ledger, the only actors to win Oscars for playing a superhero character. What did you think of the Barry Keoghan? I don't know how to say his name.
I've been saying Keegan, but I don't know if that's right.
Yeah,
but
I think it's Keegan too.
Keoghan? I don't know. What did we think of the Joker scene that was released on the internet?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. It was a different take, I feel, on the Joker, especially with his mouth was full of so much teeth.
so much teeth.
And not in I think it's because his teeth were crooked. That's what made it feel like there's so much teeth. But no, I really liked it. And like, I hope they kind of do go with next time we see the Joker, it is in a Silence of the Lambs type of capacity before maybe he escapes or something. And then it's like, I kind of would be cool with like a whole movie of different scenes like that.
I 100% agree. And my whole feeling, the reason that they cut that scene is that because the Joker scene that was in the movie, I feel like is a lot weaker than the scene that they released as a deleted scene. Like when the Joker and Riddler are kind of like joking around. Like if you had to cut something from the movie, I would have cut that because it didn't add anything. It felt tacked on. It felt like if anything, it should have been an end credit sequence because it didn't really the flow to jump back to the Arkham Asylum and have like Riddler meeting this unnamed prisoner who everyone knew was the Joker. That said, this scene, had it been in the movie, I think would have worked a little bit better. But I think to Brittany's point, my hope for a sequel, if they must use the Joker, is rather than have the Joker like pulling strings and Batman has to stop him, he's a Hannibal Lecter type. Because we've seen with The Dark Knight and Batman 89 have already given us Batman has to stop the Joker. What we've
Right.
never seen is Batman has to consult the Joker to catch a
Yeah.
different killer. And that would be really, really interesting.
Right.
And the way that Zodiac and Seven informed the Batman, I would love to see Silence of the Lamb inform the Batman sequel.
Mhm.
Yeah, and again, yeah, like you said, the last Joker scene they ended up using was not great because there's no dynamic tension. It's just like two guys. He's basically looking for an excuse to reveal that he's the Joker. You know, they're not really talking about anything. They're like sort of talking shop. Or as opposed to the scene with Batman and the Joker, it's a real dramatic scene in the tradition of Silence of the Lambs. Batman really wants something, so he's going to do the thing that he really doesn't want to do, consult, the psycho killer. There's just tons of good old fashioned dramatic tension. And one thing I thought was just like, I get that they cut it out, and I feel like it's because they didn't want to have like, a big wow crowd cheering reveal like in the middle of the movie there. And to me, that's what's sort of upsetting about like our trend towards movies which have a lot of like the Easter eggs, the big synergy moments, the big reveals, blah blah blah. Because if we start to expect them, then we start editing the movie around them.
Yeah.
And then it's like, wait, you can't reveal the Joker in the middle of the movie because it would throw everything off, because like the reveals are supposed to happen at the end. Like we're used to them happening at the end now, right?
Yeah.
We're used to any credit sequence where something new. But if that becomes like a habit, then it's like we wanted that scene in the middle for dramatic reasons,
Right.
I mean, plot continuity reasons, and also would just give Batman something more to do, which is another thing that was bugging me about the movie. It makes him look like he's taking an extreme tactic to get his goal, which is something that was missing. So, I mean, on the other hand, maybe they thought it was such a good thing that they will reserve that Silence of the Lambs structure trope for the sequel, and that's okay because then they can milk that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, who knows what the exact reasons are? I think to your point, there may be some kind of marketing reasons to like, we don't want to have the big audience pop at the end. We don't want the Joker scene to overshadow a similar scene between Batman and Riddler an hour later. Right. So like there's a lot of numerous reasons that they might have wanted to avoid that. But if they do, especially the reaction that the scene got online, I think it would behoove Matt Reeves and them to perhaps follow that thread for a potential sequel. I mean, it's definitely going to be a sequel. That movie is making $500 million and is the biggest grossing DC movie since, ironically, Joker. So, I'm super excited. And we just mentioned before we started recording, DC unveiled a sizzle reel of all of the DC content that's currently on HBO Max, which heavily features the Batman because it should be streaming on HBO sometime this month. If not in the next 2 weeks or so. So
That'll be a good one to watch at home.
Yeah, I'm excited.
With that, anything nerd poppin', Britney?
I don't know if it's really nerd popping, but I just finished Bridgerton. And
yeah, how was it?
Bridgerton.
Season
It's
2 is
so
supposed
good.
to, the characters are all different on season 2, aren't they?
Not entirely. It's just they added a couple of new characters. So this season is more about the oldest Bridgerton son, Anthony, finding his person. And so they brought in new characters who's played by Simone Ashley. I don't remember who plays her sister. I can't remember her name, but
I love that they retain their South Asianness in the show, right?
Yes. They come into the show and basically one of them is Anthony's person. And yeah, so I don't know who the next season will focus on. I know Simone is returning for next season because I know there's a whole like issue with what's his name didn't return for season 2.
Reggie Jean-Pierre.
Yeah.
Reggie Jean, is that his name?
Yeah.
The super hot guy.
Yeah, the one who apparently was supposed to be cast as Jor-El on Krypton and was not because they were like, we can't have a black Jor-El. So
yeah.
Also just way too sexy for a drill. Talk about overshadowing someone. that would throw off my
Yeah. I don't know if they're gonna get him back for season 3, but
he's also kind of got too big almost, right? Like he was the breakout star. He hasn't done anything since.
That's what I'm saying. He hasn't done anything yet. So
he hosted Saturday Night Live once, and then
I'm just like, you could pop on like one episode. It's not.
Yeah, you ain't that big. Come on now. Dominic, what's nerd pop?
Oh, I was just going to mention that the PGAM voiceover list was on the cover of the entertainment section of my own San Francisco Chronicle last weekend. Is this okay to say? Can I plug
shout out Ed
PGM
Hong.
voiceover list? Yeah. PGM voiceover list, was started up by Ed Hong and others in the Nerds of Color camp, was on the front page of a major newspaper. I consider major newspaper because it's the San Francisco Chronicle, my local one. So that was cool. It's really getting out there. And for those who don't know, it's a database for people of color voiceover actors, so that we can, when there's a race specific role, we can actually match up people who are the right race or type for things, which should sound easy, but somehow hasn't been. So
Cool. Shout out, Ed.
yeah. And yourself?
So over the weekend, the other thing that was super eventful this past weekend, besides the Grammys and WrestleMania and Morbius and Moon Knight and all the other things we just talked about, was a stand-up special on HBO called Rathaniel by Gerard Carmichael. And in fact, Gerard actually hosted Saturday Night Live this week. He says in his monologue he's the least famous person to ever host Saturday Night Live. He's a stand-up comedian. This was his third HBO special. And what was really cool about it, was directed by Bo Burnham, is that he comes out as gay in the special. And he had, he had been closeted. He's been a stand-up for probably 10 years. He had a very brief sitcom on NBC called The Carmichael Show. He's a brilliant stand-up. You should check out his previous special, 8, also directed by Bo Burnham. But the new one is called Rathaniel, and it was recorded at the Blue Note in New York like a month ago. And it's shot really well. Like, Bo Burnham is such an interesting, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's another stand-up comedian, but he's kind of like entered this new phase where he's a director more than he is a performer. So he directed this movie called 8th Grade a couple years ago. He directed, himself in my favorite piece of entertainment from last year, Inside, on Netflix, non-traditional comedy special on Netflix. But anyway, he shot Rathaniel, and Gerard Carmichael, it's a very different kind of stand-up special. I mean, it's funny as hell, but it's also very personal and very moving. And it shows that like comedy doesn't have to be, like we especially in the post Chris Rock, Will Smith stuff. Like there's this, I told you last week, like there's this kind of like type of stand-up comedian who feels that in order they only can be transgressive in order to be edgy and funny and interesting, like the Dave Chappelles of the world, who think, only telling trans jokes is the most, important thing you can do for free speech. But Gerard shows that you can be funny and edgy and interesting and also personal and moving and not have to, I hate the terminology, punch down. You know what I mean? So check out Rathaniel if you have not already. It is streaming on HBO Max. It is one of the most interesting, best pieces of art I have consumed this year. So
Well said.
That's what I will say about that. Until next time, Brittany Monet, how can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at Hi Brittany Monet on different social media platforms. Then you can also check out my other podcast at Naomi Podcast. And there's like the backlog of Black Lightning and also the Lituation Room on there. So
awesome. Yeah. Dominic?
I'm Dominic Ma at Domma, DOMMAH on Instagram or Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow, and on Instagram at RealKeithChow. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color. Go to hardknockmedia.com to find all of the podcasts in the Hard Knock family. Give us a subscribe, a like, and a review on Apple Podcasts and all your favorite podcast platforms. Go to youtube.com/the Nerds of Color to find our videos and support us on patreon.com/the Nerds of Color. You can also go to goalie.com and buy some gummies using the code HARDKNOCK for 10% off and free shipping. And until next time.
The idiot's in charge.
In charge again.
The idiot was in charge because I missed the perfect segue from the Oscars to Moon Knight by saying
the word Oscar.
Yeah.
The word there's another Oscar we should be talking about.
When you said we're done talking about all the Oscars, I was like,
it was right there.
I know, I was like waiting for it, and I was like,
if it was a crescent dart, it would have hit you in the face. Crescent dart.
Moonerang.
Beef cake. We haven't even talked about the moon copter, okay? I don't know if he gets a moon copter.
That's in episode 4.
I hope so.
It is.
I like the moon copter.